So I left this super pretentious comment on Reddit. Let me just pop it open here and let me read it real quick. Polysemy. I feel like 50%. Let me change. Let me get my pretentious voice on. Polysemy. I feel like 50% of discussions on Reddit wouldn't exist if people understood what polysemy was, because they're just logomachy about different polysemes, i.e., the assumption that one polyseme is correct and the other one is incorrect. Um, yeah, sometimes I definitely, have a way with words where it comes off very douchey, but um, I wanna discuss this because this is something that I've noticed for a long time, and I have a bunch of examples. I think because I took pictures of a lot of examples, so I'll kind of go through some of them here, see which ones fit and which ones don't. But basically, what I'm saying here is that so you have the concept of polysemy, and this is, I mean, in school, we learn about like in grade school and high school, we learn about relatively useless concepts that don't help us in life, like homographs, words that are spelled the same but pronounced differently. We learn about homophones, which is when a word. Well, I guess how they describe it in school would be something like two different words have different spellings but the same pronunciation. I guess that's how they would teach it in school. That's not a completely useless concept. And I'm not even saying like homograph is completely useless, but I guess what I'm trying to say is that polysemy is my understanding what polysemy is, the concept, the phenomenon of polysemy is infinitely more helpful for your everyday life as you go forward than these type of concepts. You know, we learn about synonyms and antonyms, and great, okay, those are somewhat helpful concepts, mostly in like art, verbal art. Not that helpful in other domains of life, but these are the things we learn about in school. We don't learn about polysemy. And so, what is polysemy? Polysemy is just the fact that the same word can have multiple different but related meanings. That's what polysemy is, and it's like duh. You know what I'm saying? Um, but I'll give a couple examples. One of my favorite examples um, would be like your body. You know, is your head a part of your body? Is it a part of your body? Well, if you're if you're boxing, your head is not a part of your body because a body shot is not a head shot, right? But if you're talking about like the mind body duality, is your head a part of your body? Of course it is. You know what I'm saying? Um, but just depending on the context, sometimes your head is a part of your body, and sometimes your body is everything from your head down to your neck down, just depending on the context. Obviously, these two different meanings of body are related to each other. Um, also, I like to use that example also just to explain how context matters a lot in what a word means, right? So context is important to deciphering polysemies. Another great example, probably even better example, is the word love. This is a word, with tons of different polysemic meanings. There's a lot of different polysemes. Polyseme would be, each of the different meanings of love. So again, one polyseme of body includes the head, one polyseme of body does not include the head. So that's what a polyseme is. But let's think about love for a second, right? Let's say that, you know, you drove to work or you bike. Let's say you bicycled to work. We're talking about you're a fit person, man, environmentally friendly. You know how it is. Healthy, all that type of shit. So you bike to work, and then you know, on your way to bike, you were talking on your phone with your Bluetooth or whatever, and you were talking to your partner, your romantic partner. And let's say your romantic partner's name is, let's say their name is Linda, okay? So you're just parking your bike, you're locking your bike up, and now you're walking into work. So you tell your partner, Linda, you say, hey, I gotta go, Linda. I love you, Linda. Okay? okay? And then you get into work, and wow, you know, you walk inside, the air conditioning's on, you know, you're sweating because you're biking in the scorching hot summer. So you get inside, and you know, you're feeling good, and then you see on the desk, you see a box of donuts, and you're like, whoa, there's some donuts here. What's up with this? And your coworker says, you know, Lynn brought those in, not Linda, Lynn. You know, we're really similar with names. Your coworker named Lynn brought these in for the office. Take yourself a donut. Then you exclamate, man, I love you, Lynn. Are these the same type of love? The way how you is the love that you have towards Linda the same love you have towards Lynn? No. These are just different polysemes of the word love. You know, hopefully those two examples make it clear what polysemy is. Clearly related to meanings, but they're not quite the same, and the context kind of determines some of those differences. And logomachy is just it's a pretentious fancy word that means debating about what a word means, basically, right? So hopefully you can understand what I'm saying here is that people are just having debates about different meanings of words with the assumption that one of these meanings is the true meaning and the other one is a invalid or fake meaning. Okay? So hopefully you can understand what this ultra giga pretentious comment is saying that I left. Right? See the picture there? That's me. That's me. Okay? So I left this pretentious comment. Sometimes I love being pretentious like that. So yeah, so he basically this whole post is just about whether AI is like whether you can whether artificial intelligence is considered to be intelligence or not. And it's just like this is such a pointless discussion because we understand what the concept of human intelligence is and we understand what the concept of artificial intelligence is. If we want to have a discussion about the content of them, like for example, how are they different? How are they the same? And in what ways and what consequences should this have? You know, they're different in these ways, so what does that imply? What are the takeaways from these differences? And again, the same thing. They're similar in this and that way. What are the takeaways from them being similar? What does that teach us? This is what the discussion should be about. Not whether it is not whether we consider it to be intelligence or not. Because the fact is, intelligence, as highlighted by this post right here and the strange debates that it causes, intelligence has multiple different polysemes. So in some polysemes of intelligence, you know, it excludes artificial intelligence. In others, it includes artificial intelligence. You know, it's the same thing with like, are gorillas intelligent? Depends on what you mean by intelligent. Depends on the polyseme of intelligent that you're using in the context. Like if we're talking about intelligent life on a different planet, we're most likely referring to intelligence in the sense of like can manipulate their environment or has language or can pass knowledge down from generation to generation and expand on that knowledge. Something that the precursors to create a culture and a civilization and maybe communication. That's probably what we mean by intelligence, you know, in that case, in that context. But of course, if we're comparing a gorilla to a plant, right, we could easily say gorillas have intelligence and a sunflower doesn't, you know? So it just depends on the context, depends what polyseme we're picking out. There can't be infinite words. I mean, polysemy is a super important concept in human language because you can be super, super narrow with what a word means. Like this is a water bottle, but it's gray and it's metal and it has this shape and it did have a hook on it that broke and I tried to glue it back together with shoe glue, which is awesome for shoes. It didn't work on this at all. Right? Theoretically, we could have a very specific word for this that just refers to water bottles that look like this. We could theoretically have that, right? We could, again, going back to love, right? we could theoretically have different words for each of love's polysemes, but that would leave us with dozens and dozens of words, and it's just not efficient, right? It's not effective either, because I mean, context already plays a huge role in language itself, right? I don't want to divulge into that too much, but that love example I gave is a great one where context matters. And the boxing example is a great example of how context matters. A lot of it's related to polysemes, but just think of, you know, did you hear that? Right? The context is going to tell you what that means. It might have been a loud thump. It could have been thunder. It could have been a mountain lion. You know what I'm saying? Like a mountain lion mating call where it sounds like a woman screaming. That's a mountain lion. What was that? You need the context to know what that refers to. And with all pronouns, if you know you're talking about like anytime you use the word he, you need context to decipher who he refers to or it. Okay, these are pronouns. Pronouns necessarily need context, but again, even content words like love, they need context too to be fully understood what they mean within that context. All right, so that's a long kind of ramble here, and I guess now I just want to take a look at some of these examples. So here's a big one that is just people always discussing this thing about if all relationships are so-called transactional, right? They're just saying they're not transactional, they're cooperational, right? Another person said, you just said what he has differently. That's still a transaction. What you and I bring is still a transaction. Almost all relationships are transactional. Isn't this the most pointless and uninteresting discussion you've ever read in your life? They're just debating what, again, logomachy. Let's get pretentious with it, man. Logomachy. All they're discussing is what does transactional mean. And again, transactional has different polysemes, right? So really what's going on is ram, bam, booey is referencing a different polyseme than famous ad 9467. They're both okay. Let me add a little bit more about polysemy, right? So things have hierarchies, and they branch out to more specific things. Like for example, you can have a dog, and then you can get a Bichon, you can get a pit bull, you can get a Shih Tzu, you can get a wiener dog, right? The more specific examples, right? You could sports, basketball, tennis, or you could even add a new layer, right? Sports, racket sports, and then go down another one, tennis, ping pong, whatever, right? So they're using the same word transactional, but transactional, just like dog has different types, transactional is different types. It's polysemes. So they're not even debating about the same thing. They're referencing different polysemes. That's all they're doing. So nothing interesting is being discussed here. Waste of time. Because there is interesting things to discuss here about relationships, but I mean everybody's just getting caught up in these word arguments, in the logomachy. Let's see what else we got here. Again, here's another example from that same discussion. People just don't want to admit that relationship is transactional because they want to believe in unconditional love. And again, this is another one where people always debate about what does unconditional mean. There's different polysemes. Come on, like this is whether love is or isn't unconditional. Who cares? We can describe, just like we can describe what artificial intelligence and human intelligence is. We can describe their similarities. We can describe their differences, and we can describe the implications, the consequences, blah 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 about that. You can do the same thing with different types of love, right? You can explain and talk about how maybe the love between a mother and a son is different than that between a man and his wife, or a wife and her husband, or a husband and his husband, or a wife and her wife, whatever. There you go. Some more. Just pause that and read it if you want. All relationships outside of family bonds are transactional, right? So they're making this new delineation where family bonds aren't transactional now. But then, this guy goes on to say even familial relationships are transactional. I hate how people try and pretend this isn't true, and I don't understand why they do that. Everything is transactional. Again, they're just debating about what transactional means. They're just debating about the word. It's not an interesting discussion because, take that fucking word out of it. Let's just, stop talking about transactionalness and let's talk about concepts. Let's talk about behavior. Blah. I saved way too many of these images about transactional relationships. I mean, go ahead and read this. I'm all good. Right there saying the dog loves them basically without condition. Again, fair game, different polysemes, baby. Look at them putting in the logical statements here, Again, looks like a very insightful comment, but it's actually pointless because again, they're just debating what a word means. They're debating polysemes, man. This polyseme is correct. That polyseme is not real. That's basically what they're saying, in my opinion, in my analysis. Man, how many freaking comments did I save about transactionalness and unconditionalness? Did I have to save so many? These are from months ago, by the way. Can people who protest speciesism eat plants? Right, so now they're just debating. So in this case, for those who aren't aware, speciesism is kind of the idea, the analysis, I suppose we could say that. It kind of is like trying to talk about or explain why, people, at least in every culture has their own, they treat different animals differently, right? So in the West, the way that a cat is treated is different than the way a cow is treated, and speciesism basically kind of just talks about that. And it usually just refers to animals, but what they're trying to do here is look at their oh, there you go. So there's a definition there. Speciesism, the assumption of human superiority leading to the exploitation of animals. And then, basically they're saying, well, plants are also species. And again, this isn't really a content discussion. This is just debating what a word means based off of an imperfect morphology. It's like do people still do this? I know 10 years ago, people used to do this all the time where they'd be like, I'm not homophobic, I'm not scared of gays, I'm not Islamophobic, I'm not scared of the Muslims or whatever. And it's just like, the word has a so-called imperfect morphology, and they're trying to be cute with it and be like, well, phobia means a fear of. It's like, it's a suffix like phobia, just like a word can have polysemes, okay? And fear and hatred, right? You can see how these are obviously related, right? So, phobia also developed into something like intolerance of or hatred towards, again, related to the original meaning, fear of, right? Again, this is one of the beauties and functions and efficiencies of language, that we can repurpose things or give things multiple purposes. And so, that's basically all they're doing here. Again, pointless discussion, because the debate about, if you want to debate something here, the word speciesism is irrelevant. And that's just logomachy. You can debate about the ethicalness of eating plants, or you can debate if they're morally equivalent. Eating a cow is the same thing as eating a dandelion, right? Or if you want a strawberry that drops from a bush, if you want to take it that far, eating fruit, right? Quite different from eating like a stem. But you could debate that if you want to. But you see, that has content. Their whole discussion here has no content. It's just the meaning of the word. It's just right. Here's another one with the concept of no such thing as unskilled labor, right? Like they're saying unskilled labor isn't a thing because all work can be, like, I'll steel man them. Like, anyone works at a job and they're probably going to be better than the new person. Therefore, there's skill involved in that. Right? If you do, like even someone who's a cashier can get through the customers really quickly, click the buttons really quickly. They might be super social with the people they're talking to. They might be super good at resolving conflict when a customer's angry. There's obviously skill and aptness in every single job. So what they're trying to say is, well, this, again, they're just debating a polyseme, right? Because when people talk about unskilled labor in an academic sense, right, one of the polysemes of unskilled, when it comes before labor, and when we're talking about economics, it means something along the lines of a job that you don't need prior education to start or to get. Like, obviously being a doctor is an example of like skilled labor, because you need to go to school for X amount of years, tons of years. Same thing with being like a heavy machines operator. Like, if you're a crane operator, right, you need to take courses, and you need to be thoroughly trained before you can operate a huge crane, right? You need a lot of education, a lot of time investment into education that's off the job training. But that's not a perfect definition. I'm just, because that's not the point of this. My point is not to, explain exactly what unskilled is. My point here is just that unskilled has different polysemes, like the other words. So if you want to debate that there's no such thing as unskilled labor, okay, you're right if you're referencing this polyseme of unskilled, but you're wrong if you're referencing that polyseme of unskilled. Does that make sense? And here's another great one that people are always debating, right? What does living wage mean, right? They're just debating the term, right? People say, everyone should have a living wage. Minimum wage should be minimum wage, kind of what the post was saying earlier. And then, people will debate what the term living wage means, right? As this person was saying, $350 a month on a shared room, whatever, living a living wage is he defines it. Someone else will say, well, no, a living wage is, being able to afford your own one-bedroom apartment in a decent neighborhood or something, right? These phrases mean different things to different people based on different contexts. So the discussion ends up just being, that's not a living wage. It's like, you don't deserve a living wage, or we all deserve a living wage, or whatever. It just becomes about debating what living wage means instead of debating the content. For example, we could easily reframe this discussion into something like, should minimum wage, 40 hours a week or whatever's full time in that country. So I think in some countries it's the minimum wage like 32 hours or something. So should your minimum full-time working minimum wage worker be able to afford a one-bedroom apartment in an average neighborhood? You could frame it like that and debate the content. And point is, that's another term where just a lot of logomachy involved in. Another example. Fuck, I got some good examples here. I don't even remember half of these discussions. I would just take a screenshot when I came across them, and I'm just like, that would be a good example for this video I want to make one day in the damn distant future. 8 hours ago it says right there. This shit's probably from like 8 months ago. I don't know. But as this person is saying, it sounds, slavery never ended. It sounds cliche, and it's not an original idea. Their argument here is that we're all just working to make money, and we go to work so we can afford to live, and that is therefore some type of slavery. So I'll just you can read this whole post if you want, pause it and read it, blah, 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 blah. We are all slaves. I want to break free. And of course, it's just like debating what words mean. This course of discussion devolves into things like, well, that's not slavery compared to like chattel slavery, where people were being bought and sold and weren't being paid a wage at all. They had. You want to consider this slavery? Go for it. You know what I'm saying? But it's we can again, just like with human and artificial intelligence, we can describe the difference between, you know, different forms of slavery, because the history of slavery is very long in the entire world, and it's not the same in every single place in the world. They're different. You know, some places very fucking brutal, some places less brutal. And so, like, if you want to, like, we can describe the difference between, you know, the concept of wage slavery and chattel slavery. So, like, there's no point in debating whether wage slavery is actually slavery. If we can describe the concept, we can describe the differences, and we can describe the problems with wage slavery. We can give it a different name if you don't like calling it slavery, you know, because it's going to be the same concept, whether we call it wage slavery or wageism or whatever the hell we want to call it. We can describe the concept. We can describe, again, its differences between chattel slavery, and we can describe, you know, the ways that it's not good. We can maybe just, some people would maybe chime in and say, here are the ways that it is good. You know, we can discuss the concept. Let's not but everyone's getting bogged down in the word slavery. Is it slavery or not? This isn't slavery. Another person would chime in, you're totally right, this is slavery. Logomachi motherfuckers. Ha! Yes. Here's another one, man. Controversial thought. He should have put this shit on r/deep thoughts. If you guys don't know about that subreddit, there's a lot of silly posts on that subreddit. A lot of humor, unintentional humor. And yes, I sound pretentious saying that, and I'm unashamed to sound pretentious when saying that. Okay, I still participate in the subreddit. Though a lot of good shit on deep thoughts too. It's not all surface thoughts or drunk thoughts or high thoughts, you know. What's the difference between a termite mound and a skyscraper? Both are just structures built by animals. Does this mean all man-made objects are part of nature? And again, polysemy, man-made has different polysemes, natural has different polysemes. You know, when we're discussing, like, say, ghosts and supernatural things, yeah, a skyscraper is natural. It's a part of the natural world. You know, it's natural, whereas a ghost is supernatural, or, you know, chi or whatever is supernatural. But, you know, sometimes natural means not affected by human beings. You know, in that case, a mound would be natural. Like a termite mound would be natural, but a skyscraper wouldn't. It just depends on the polyseme of man-made or natural that you're referring to. Okay? That's all that it is. You know, discussion over. Now, we can discuss the consequences. You know, you could say, well, you know, you could say our skyscraper is really, you know, something we shouldn't be building. Is that really, you know, deleterious for the environment? You know? Sorry, I just got to be pretentious for a second there. But you could, because we have the content here, so you could say, well, termites build mounds, you know, ants build hills, and, you know, they're insane civilizations, and, you know, so is that different than human beings from this philosophical perspective? You can discuss those things. How is it different? How is it the same? You know, what are the consequences? What are the implications of it? Again, discussing the content, not discussing the words. Not the Logomachi. If you watch this video through and through, you're gonna remember that word, logo motherfucking Machi. And hopefully polyseme and polysemy and that shit too. See, look, this is the comment I gave here. This was many months ago. Kind of what I was just saying here, I guess. I don't really think whether skyscrapers are deemed as natural or not is a meaningful discussion. Boom. And this looks like it's the last example I have. This was about, I suppose, self-sufficiency. They're saying it's a pipe dream. The only people that are self-sufficient are uncontacted indigenous tribes. And then someone replies, there are no uncontacted indigenous tribes. Africa has been fully explored many times over, and all human life is indigenous to Africa. So it's like, can we like see how like that's like the most, I don't know, like polysemy. Sure, you can define uncontacted. Like if you want to just define, if you don't like the term uncontacted tribe, if that term bothers you, that's okay. But there is a phenomenon out there. There are groups of people who the globalized world has not yet encountered and been in contact with. And they are not reliant on the globalized technology, like electricity, factory fabricated fabrics, pesticides for growing a large amount of food, and the list goes on and on and on. And so like again, what does this comment, like they're not discussing anything contentful here. They're just wasting everyone's time with a discussion about, they're basically proposing they're proposing their own polyseme for uncontacted, right? They're saying there's no such thing as uncontacted people because all human life goes back to Africa at some point, and apparently Africa has been fully explored many times over. Although I'm not sure how true that is. I think, I might be wrong about this, but I'm pretty sure the Central African forests might have uncontacted people in there still. I don't know for sure. And because this guy doesn't like the term uncontacted, I could say, it has, people, it might have people living there who still, actually, I'm not really sure if Africa does. Africa might not. I know Papua New Guinea does, and I know the Amazon does. I don't know if Central African rainforest, like the Congo forest and stuff, I don't know if that does. Doesn't really matter though, because it adds no content to the discussion. It's just debating what a word means. It's debating what polyseme is correct. So I just wanted to go through a lot of those examples and hopefully some of you are influenced by this and can start to see through the Logomachi via polysemy discussions, and hopefully you can avoid those and not have those, and not even read them, because they're pointless to read. You don't learn anything from them, and you definitely don't gain anything engaging in them either. So I don't know. That's all I have to say. I'm gonna bow down respectfully. Peace. Actually, I do want to have one final closing note, because I know there's going to be some people thinking that definitions of, if a word can have any meaning, then it's just entropy and chaos, and it's just like, yeah, that's a great theory, but it just doesn't work out like that. And there are some domains where, keeping technical jargon defined matters, again, in academic subjects or whatever. But we're talking about everyday, day-to-day language, common vocabulary. Again, polysemy is a feature of languages. It's not a bug. It's not a hindrance. Without it language just, you'd need millions of words. And how specific are all these words? So language does not devolve into entropy. Polysemy exists in every single language, and they all work. Okay. And yes, some fields, need more specific jargons, especially the natural sciences. But okay, I'm out now.